Welcome to the Carl Sterling Podcast, delivering conversations with experts and excellence in education.
Great.
All right, here we are. Well, thank you for joining us here. I have a special guest with me today. She is somebody I've been following mostly on Instagram, just thinking, man, she got cool ideas, and I'm taking some of those and using them here in my clinic, which we do. Thank you. Based in London, UK. Her name is Dana Latter. And I'll tell you, I'll do a little introduction here, but you know, she works in the area of, let's say, working with parents and a holistic approach. And this, is it the Melillo?
Yes.
Melillo Method, which
Robert
I'm not going to say anything about because I would just really love to have you talk about this method and all the other things you do, helping families, helping people, applying the program to, let's say, child's individual needs, which combines child development therapy, sensory stimulation, primitive reflexes, integration of that, brain balancing, which I really want to pick your brain about weaker hemisphere type of things, and a lot more. So Dana Latter, thanks a million for joining me. Welcome. Great to have you here. First of all, how you doing?
I'm fine. Nice day here. So
good.
Being grateful.
Yeah, here too. And you know, I don't know when I first came upon you on Instagram, but I was looking, I'm like, man, every once in a while I'll see something that just hits me like, okay, I need to follow this person and try to get notifications, because when they post like you, I want to know what it is that's going up there. So, and seriously, I have taken some of your things and we implement them here because, you know, you're the expert in what you do. But one thing I'll just say is that we're all humans and we all have nervous systems and a brain. So a lot of times these things can really help a lot of us, or all of us maybe. We just have to tailor them to individual needs. Can I ask just a really super general question about the work you do and how you came about, you know, this whole field of work, which is so interesting?
It is indeed. So I've got two sons. My oldest is 16 and my youngest is 13. With my oldest son, it wasn't difficult to see that he had issues. He walked at 19 months. He didn't speak until he was 4 or 5, but I kind of didn't accept what the diagnosis or what the medical field here was offering me. And obviously, I saw very little progress if it was a speech and language therapist that we worked with or occupational therapist. And I just had a belief in me, I don't know how at that time, that he's going to overcome the issues. And I just started reading and searching all day and all night until I found ways to help him.
Yeah, interesting. So what was, you know, when I was working up at the university here, I've had 2 different periods of time where I worked at Syracuse University. And I ended up working a lot in the school of, no, I'm just saying, as a matter of fact, what they call it, learning disabilities. But it also includes, it's very inclusive. Now they call it, also called the Inclusive University. So I've had experience working with students with, let's say, autism, Fragile X syndrome, Down syndrome. And what I find is it's actually among the most rewarding work I've ever done, the most gratifying. And I learned the most because everyone, as humans anyways, we're all so uniquely different. But I don't know, in Parkinson's, there's a thing that Michael J. Fox says, if you met a person with Parkinson's, you met a person with Parkinson's. Now,
Exactly.
please correct me if I'm wrong or politically incorrect, but I also heard from a student at the school, if you met a person with autism, you met a person
You
with
met
autism.
one.
One person,
Exactly.
because
One
everyone's so
person.
different. What what
Exactly.
what was your tell us about this journey though? You're reading day and night, you're studying.
Yes.
Um, where did you start with, let's say, working with your son? I'm assuming working with your son, trying to help
Yes.
him.
Yes.
What type of
Yes.
difficulties did he face, or does he face?
Oh, just anything, he couldn't kick a ball. He had bedwetting issues, language, just couldn't ride a bicycle, couldn't swim, just anything, couldn't write.
Mm,
And when he was in school, it was because, he was a smart boy. So obviously, he was getting his phonics and everything. But it was an easy solution just to give him a laptop for him to type and not actually working on forming the letters and helping him learn to write,
mhm.
which obviously they didn't have the personnel to do it. So
Sure.
that's another issue.
Is he verbal?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
he is. But when he was in school, he wasn't. So, as a mom, I was very stressed because obviously I knew that things weren't right there and they weren't. But nowadays, after, implementing a lot of working on the root cause of his issues, a lot of them, if it's core stability, primitive reflexes, and so on. And afterwards, his speech improved dramatically, his comprehension, his
Okay.
ability to, play football, tennis, and all the rest.
Sure. Let me just go back because I wrote down a couple of notes here. Okay, so we're looking at that this, you said so early on you knew something was different, let's say.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you started reading, studying.
Yes. So
Tell us more.
I came across a primitive reflexes. So obviously, primitive reflexes isn't something new. It's
Right.
been known for the last 60 or so years. But if I could dive a little bit into primitive reflexes and how that can help. So at the time when I was doing primitive reflexes, so it's all babies are born with a set of primitive reflexes that are supposed to help them in survival. So in the birthing canal and in the first months of life, but they're not needed after about a year, and they're supposed to be dormant in the central nervous system. But what happens often, for many reasons, nowadays, if it's stress from COVID or we don't know exactly why they're still there, so it's a hindrance on the development. And because of that, we can see lots of issues like bedwetting, coordination, reading and writing, copying from the board, and behavior issues, anxiety, and so on. So what we do, we actually mimic baby movements. But the difference that I know nowadays in comparison to my first journey with primitive reflexes is by using stimulation, like a light, sound. We can enhance the progress much faster. So instead of working for years, you can just work for 1 year and have many improvements. So if it's someone with a right brain deficiency, so we'd be using blue lenses. If it's someone with left brain deficiency, we'd add the red lenses. And you would add music, smell, and so on to enhance the progress. So, for example, I'll be showing some tools, not for purpose of marketing, just to show the difference that it can really, with the frequencies, can show how the primitive reflexes can inhibit much faster. So one of the tools I like using for vibration, for example, for the rooting reflex, would be vibrating with the frequencies. So this is a tool called Resimax, which is really a great invention. First of all, it's not that expensive, and it can really help in many aspects. If it's with the hand, with the palmer, so we're using like every inch of the pressure, and it's designed in such a way that we can use it on the sides and just apply pressure. So I'd be adding, for example, the tens unit on the weak hemisphere. So I'd be putting like 4 stickers and working on that. I'd be adding essential oils.
Nice.
And just everything together while doing the exercises, you can see really faster improvements.
Okay, I have a question. First of all, just for fun, I have my red glasses here.
Great.
I have a set of like maybe 10. I get some green ones. The blue ones are out there. But what I'm curious about, because we found these to be beneficial for other things, like some people respond better to green, let's say, when we're giving them a manual stretch, and they'll stretch further. Maybe red might lock them up more, or some people respond to red. But what I'm curious is, let's go back to the weaker hemisphere. How do you determine which hemisphere is weaker?
Okay. So first of all, if you go to Dr. Melillo's website or the book, he's written a few books. So he's got Disconnected Kids.
Oh, great.
Reconnected Kids.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes. And there are questionnaires in there to help you like determine the weaker hemisphere. But you can't just rely on the questionnaire. You should do a few more assessments, like, standing on one leg and saying, where's your body shifting to? Or, the Fukuda test or the Romberg test. And also, according to these tests, to see, where you're leaning to the weaker hemisphere. So you'd use a few methods. You wouldn't just rely on a questionnaire.
That makes sense. So, for example, then, if you're standing on one leg and you lean a certain way, are you going to be leaning into the weaker hemisphere? Is that how it works?
Yes.
Okay. All right. But interesting, because I've heard a couple of those tests. I'm familiar with a lot of different tests, but not those.
Yeah.
So that'd be really interesting. Because, I was talking with a couple of doctors here in the past year. One of them is a best-selling author and a Harvard professor, Dr. John Rady, who's written some really great books. In fact, his ADHD 2.0 book is a really good one. It came out last year. And then Dr. Luigi Bucuto, a good friend in South Carolina, about how here, I'm sure it's probably there too, but I think if somebody's on the spectrum, if you will, and I apologize to anybody if I'm politically incorrect or seem that way to anybody, but I have been told by both of these gentlemen that it's called autism spectrum disorder. Okay.
Yes.
And so, for example, Asperger's is no longer a diagnosis.
No.
To many people. There's some people who, even doctors, who are going to use it because of the distinct, what distinguishes it from maybe some other things. But technically, it's no longer a thing. It's within the spectrum, autism spectrum disorder. So, are these tests that you're mentioning things that can be used with anyone, pretty much?
Yes,
I mean, we all have brains, right? So.
Yes, with anyone, to determine, your weak hemisphere. So what we actually see in developmental issues that one hemisphere develops faster than the other. So a lot of times, with Asperger, so the right hemisphere has developed really well and the left hemisphere isn't. So what we want to do is we want to make them more equal, and we want to create new connections.
Absolutely. Those connections, the neural firing pattern connections are so important, right?
Exactly.
And one of the things I noticed you do, I mean, there's a lot, but cross body patterns, arms
Yes.
crossing, legs crossing.
Yes.
And we know that anytime we cross the midline of the body, it helps the two hemispheres of the brain to work better
Exactly.
together, right?
Exactly.
So let me ask you this, because I actually never thought of this until right now. You have a weaker hemisphere.
Yes.
By the way, is another thing too, because I have a million questions. Is there typically, like, is one side usually weaker, like is in most people, let's say, or maybe it's people on the ASD spectrum?
Yes.
Is there a hemisphere that's generally weaker, like right or left, or does it vary a lot?
I mean, often we'd say, for example, ADHD and that have a weak right hemisphere, and like dyslexic, you'd see a left hemisphere deficiency.
Okay.
So there are characteristics that you could say, that's
Okay.
right hemisphere, but still you need to check and see if that's the case.
Okay. So that was just a random question, but as you're working towards now addressing the weaker hemisphere and let's say strengthening it, I guess.
Yes.
Are you going to change your exercises based on which hemisphere is weaker, or are you going to do the same exercises like cross body patterns and other exercises and just cause the two hemispheres to be forced into working more together? How does that work?
Yeah, usually it would be, similar kind of exercises.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be stimulating the weaker side. So you'd use equipment that suits the weaker side. So like I said, the left brain deficiency, you use the red. You use different maybe smells or sort of that, but it's similar exercises.
I never thought about smells. Color therapy, because all of it is input, right? So you have like sensory input.
Exactly. And also with the glasses that you showed, so I'd be adding even light to it, not just the color.
Oh.
So for example, let me just get it a second.
Yeah, these are my red. So I have a set of maybe 8 or 10 colors. And for those watching, these red ones tend to lock me up. I do a better job stretching when I have green ones on. But
so these are my red ones, and
okay.
Here they're called highlights. I'll send you the link afterwards. So
please,
can you see it? So you kind of
you have light in there.
Yes.
Wow.
Can you see it every few seconds? It kind
I do.
of yes. So you can use it either for the outer eye field or for the inner one, and you just you program it for your according to your needs.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, if you can send me that afterwards. What are the name of those again?
Highlights.com.
Oh man.
Yes.
Well, I know what's next on my list now.
Yes. So we've got the blue ones also have a light, the same kind of. And
it's incredible.
So I'd be using, so when we do the exercises, I'd be using the glasses, the tens, the smell, everything together. And
okay,
one sun is is blue and the other is red.
Okay, so tell me, like, again, and I'm sorry because you already said this once, but if you can repeat, because this will be new to probably just about everybody who sees it. When do you use red? When do you use blue glasses?
Okay, the red you use for a stimulate a weak left hemisphere. The blue you'd be using for a weak right hemisphere.
Okay. And the lights, tell me how
Yes.
those work as far as stimulation. Are you looking at visual field?
You're looking at everything. So, first of all, I just mentioned that in terms of vision therapy, for example, that's a kind of therapy that I mention in my book a lot. But when we look at the developmental hierarchy, so vision is like at the top. It's, when we work on our executive functioning. So vision is not something that I'd be starting with, but I would be integrating the vision to these exercises in order to stimulate the whole body and help the whole body progress.
Interesting. Yeah, vision is so important.
It is.
And it's such a big sensory input because of our, just everything, how it works with the vestibular system, balance. You're just standing there, and even for some people, even just standing on two legs, and then you shut your eyes, it can be difficult to continue standing without getting off balance.
Exactly. And I also always like the exercises that you show with motion guidance, which is also an awesome tool with adding the laser to it.
Yeah, we love that. This podcast is about you, but I will say that we love our motion guidance.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
I've got my virtual background on, so it's not going to show up too well.
I don't know. We can see it.
Yeah, the laser gives instant feedback. Like as soon as they put it on, or however we decide to apply it.
Yes.
Instant feedback. And so it's actually a better cueing for me than I am, because I'm not the best cuer in the world for like posture and things. But okay, so just want to dial in on my thoughts here. You've got vision, you've got the lights in the glasses. You're looking at field, you're looking at everything, but you're doing a lot of things simultaneously. Tell me, how do you use the TENS unit? And I'm sure it's individualized and maybe even different from time to time for the same person. How do you use the TENS unit?
Okay, so the TENS, I'd be putting the stickers on the weaker hemisphere, on the weaker side. So, for example, on the back, if it's a right brain deficiency, so I'd be sticking them on the left side.
Right. Okay.
And I'd be using it for about an hour, 2 hours, as long as we're doing the exercises, they're still there.
So this is going to deliver some type of stimulation, like sensory, nerves, skin. It's like electronic, right? I never used the TENS.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
But I'd be using also different kinds of vibrations. So each kind of vibration gives kind of different input to the brain. So we'd be using different, for example, if I'd be using the Resimax and the TENS, it's all different kind of noise to the brain.
I really like that. Because we do a lot of vibration here to help, stimulate nervous system's brain. A lot of times it just helps people to move better right away. Even in Mexico, last week, I think Laura's on watching with us. Laura and I had people take off their shoes and socks, people with Parkinson's, right? And they just walk barefoot for a few minutes. We watched them walk with them first, with their shoes and socks, natural. Don't try to impress us. Walk normal. Take off shoes and socks, walk around a few minutes, then put them back on. Everybody moved better to some degree. And some people felt what they feel, I think, is more important than what I see. But so that stimulation is so important. But when you get in multiple forms of stimulation, what do you see on your end?
There's, first of all, I can see that by activating the vagus nerve, I can see calmness. I can see emotional regulation being better.
Oh, wow.
I can see in terms of response. I can see due to the stimulation, the response time is much faster.
Mm-hmm.
And many other small things like with language, with understanding, a whole much better, picture. And
That's
in
really
terms of
interesting.
language,
Mm-hmm.
I really saw amazing things with, stimulating the vagus nerve, doing just more oral exercises, so just, learning to move your tongue from side to side, blowing bubbles, using a straw, everything helped the language develop.
See, that's great. I never thought about any of this stimulation helping with language. Yet at the same time, what I find is that the stimulation can help with cognition here.
Yes.
So why wouldn't it help with language? I just never correlated the two together.
Yes.
As a result of stimulation, anyways.
Yes. Just even exercises like stimulating the tongue and adding essential oils, while doing it, it all helps all our sensory understanding.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. With the essential oils, is there anything in particular that's like you always use it? Do you have a variety you use? How do you figure out which ones to use?
I usually use like rosemary and peppermint. So I'd be using stronger tastes.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if I do activities, of putting all kinds of tastes like on the tongue, not to use the sweet tastes, because if you want any changes with the brain, you really need to use the stronger ones like peppermint or frankincense and stuff like that all have shown to have benefit on language.
Okay. Really interesting. So you're using then, you're taking a drop of oil, you put it under the tongue or something?
Yes.
Oh, see, I like to do that anyways. So I like strong flavors.
Yes. And
Excellent.
another thing for the exercises, when we're speaking about the hemispheric model, so for example, we said red would be for a week left. So I'd be, all kinds of focus and following. I'd be using like a red ball and a blue ball for the week right.
Okay.
So, have a ball, focus on it a few seconds, slow movements to the left, slow movements to the right, and just do it with the ball.
Oh, that's great. What about now? Have you ever worked with somebody who is nonverbal?
Yes.
And what are there any differences you see? Like, do they start to become slightly verbal or more responsive in any ways? How does it work?
Yes, much more responsive, and just when I say it's not, my experience is not with children who were, I had experience with children who are nonverbal, but the ones who had more success had a limited amount of words, and then, they just started learning to speak. So that was a massive improvement. And the ones who were nonverbal as it just had more sounds that they were producing.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting. So you're nonverbal, and you're finding more responsiveness, which totally makes sense because we're getting back into nervous systems and brains, and we all have them. So if we can stimulate them, usually we
And
get
the ones who were nonverbal had much better understanding than before.
Oh, wow.
So even if they didn't produce the words yet, the whole comprehension was much, much better.
That's fantastic. I love this. So let me ask you this. I'm thinking about your average, your normal session. If there is a norm, there must be at least a framework you work within. Like,
Yes.
we have people who come in and, it's a very broad framework of conceptually what we will do. Now, this can vary a whole lot between people, but for you, you're going to do a session. What does an average session look like from beginning to end?
Okay, so the way I work with the parents, because they're the ones who need to do the hard work. Because in order to see changes, you need to work 7 days a week, do 3 times a day. So they're the ones who need to know the program.
That's good to know too, because I don't know a lot of people would know that. I didn't know that.
So I'd explain the program to them, show them the exercises, show them, the core exercises that we're going to do, the primitive reflexes. Here are the difficulties that they're facing and trying to help. And more than all, making sure that it's interesting, because if it's not interesting and fun, it's difficult to do it with a child. And if you don't do it with your child yourself, you will be having problems with cooperation.
It goes into a thing I teach all the time, everywhere. Got to do things. We have to do things people like to do, because if we do things they hate to do, they won't be coming back for anything more.
Yes.
And there are plenty of things to choose from, at least for what I do. We can find things they will do. So that's a good point. And we do try to gamify everything, because fun's better than no fun.
Yes. Yes.
I like that fun more than I like anything else.
Exactly.
So I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Sorry. And especially, when you're talking about small children, so you can't expect, to use the light on your phone to do the exercises. You just need to do it in an interesting way. So to have all kinds of toys alike to follow, and just every day have something new that it will never be boring. And it doesn't have to be an expensive program, and you don't have to buy the best gadgets in the world. First of all, is the connection you've got with the child, and through the connection, you can have the child be engaged in all of the exercises.
Yeah.
And it's more repetition and not how much you spend.
I'm glad you said that too, because we know that repetition is the mother of skill.
Yes.
And it's because when you repeat and you get those same neural pathways synaptically happening, and then eventually they connect together, and then you now have a new skill because you practice it so much.
Yes.
So important. The other thing I wanted to mention is your book called Against the Odds.
Yes.
Where can people get your book?
It's on Amazon.
All right. Now, is it, and I didn't check this, and I'm really sorry because I've been traveling so much. Yes. Is it available globally? Amazon? I have 2 books on Amazon, and some countries don't carry it, but I don't know how it works or why. Yes. But it's
in the US, I think there's no problem, and I think other parts of the world as well.
Yes. Okay. Having connectivity problems with this, I guess. Okay. But good. Against the Odds. And in your book, you talk about all this and more.
Yes, but I must mention that this book was written a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. It was before I learned all about the Melillo Method and stimulation and what I do. And at the time, my boys were much younger. And as puberty arrived. So things got much more challenging at the time. And after learning the Melillo Method and learning of other ways to help them, of course, we overcame many of the issues. And I believe that in many cases, you can overcome.
Yeah. Here we go, folks. Just hopefully you can see this. With a
Yeah.
oh, good. Yeah, please. Yeah, I love that too. That's a really great cover.
Yes.
Great cover.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you know, that's part of the process here when we have a mission. You know, I have a mission and you have a mission and
Yes.
maybe several missions, and then we're always learning, you know, every day, reading, researching, whatever, trying things out. You know, every time. That's why it took me 3.5 years to write my first book, because I just kept having to add to it and add to it.
Yes.
So then I get it comes out and I learn more. It's, oh, I got to write another book. Because so it sounds like you might have to write another book.
Yes, for sure. It's completely and
Or version or edition 2 or something like that, because I know I'm going to want to keep up with what you're doing. And of course I can find you on Instagram and Facebook. By the way, your Instagram handle is Sensory Change UK.
Yes.
Exactly how it sounds. Sensory Change UK for United Kingdom.
Yeah.
You post great stuff on there.
Oh, thank you. I'm always, so happy to create new obstacle courses or just create new ideas that inspire me.
But we didn't, so for those people watching, we didn't talk about anything beforehand. We have never spoken to each other before. No. This is our first time meeting.
Yes.
And you nicely asked me for maybe some questions, which I did not send you because I don't usually do that. So I'm sorry. But there is one question I have that's not fair, but I'm going to ask you anyways, because I know you'll be able to answer it, is as we come to closing here. Do you have anything, like if you have one piece of advice to give a person, let's say, who's living with or working with somebody who's ASD, let's say, autism spectrum disorder, or a person with autism spectrum in the spectrum, if there's one piece of advice that you would give, what is that piece of advice?
You'd be able to overcome so many of the challenges, and don't accept answers like, that's part of the ASD, that's part of ADHD. There's no such thing. You can overcome your issues.
I think that's a great piece of advice, because really in the end, I got to go back for a minute. There's a gentleman I worked with for years, such a smart gentleman. And he was doing his graduate work here at the university. And we spent a lot of time together. I was his person who, for training, physical training, therapies, weight loss, whatever. He's doing so well, and I'm so proud of him. But he would oftentimes tell me things like, whoever they is, it could be the medical community, the government, whoever it is, the people, they want to fix us because there's something wrong with us. They think we're just born this way and we're wired different. And the thing that can be difficult, though, is our quality of life may be different because of our let's say, unique abilities and lack of abilities that might be norm for somebody who's not norm for us. And so when we look at in the end, what we want for what I want for everybody who I work with is to lead a better, improved, more an improved quality of life, a better quality of life, so that they're not just functioning more optimally on their own in their house and activities of daily living, but when you get into any type of situation in life, on the phone, in person, social, different social functions, especially with, I know people with multiple sclerosis who have brain lesions where their hearing part of the brain is, and so overstimulation can occur because of too many people talking at the same time.
Yes.
I know people who living with autism who have the same issues, but what we want is improved quality of life. So you instill hope and you show possibility in what you do by telling us you can overcome things, and I appreciate that, because it's all about quality of life, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And we deserve the best.
Well, can you hold up your book again? Because yours looks better than in my virtual background.
Yeah.
Go to Amazon, folks. Pick up the book. Read about it. This is firsthand experience. This is a mom who has a son, ASD, who's also been through the Melillo Method and all kinds of other things and is helping others as well. Somebody who knows what she's doing. Learn from her, learn from the book she wrote. And thanks. I appreciate everybody watching. And Dana, I really appreciate you being with me.
Oh,
sorry it took so long for us to connect.
No, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And yeah, just hang on for a minute afterwards here. And again, Against the Odds is the book. Go get it, folks. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dana. Hope you have a fantastic day.
Yeah.
All right.